I'm Mozaman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Star Steps. We are a Berlin-based education academy where we help people break into careers in IT.
Yeah, my name's Anna McDougall. I'm Director of Product and Engineering at Axel Springer National Media and Tech.
And I'm Vanessa, the founder of Girls Talk, and we connect female talent to global businesses.
I'm Carrie. I work at Zalando as a senior talent acquisition team lead, and I'm also leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for talent acquisition.
Hi everyone, my name is Alina Bassi. I'm an impact investor at Ananda Impact Ventures, and we invest into impactful businesses that are changing the world from pre-seed to seed, so fairly early stage. And I'm also the co-founder of a non-profit called Founderland, headquartered out of Berlin, supporting women of colour entrepreneurs to raise capital across Europe.
Hey, so I'm really excited about our discussion today. And I'm going to kick off with just setting the landscape for this episode. So we're looking at the state of women in tech in Germany, and sort of more specifically in Berlin, but Germany as a whole. And, you know, when we think about women in tech, if we look at the data, we've got 17% of women who are in Germany who work in tech. But when we look at the global workforce, women account for just over half. So hearing that and being in the ecosystem, what are your thoughts on this narrative?
I'll open up. I guess something that I've seen is that there's a problem getting women into tech at every level. So it starts super early on. It starts as early as when they're kids and they're just not encouraged necessarily as girls to do technical subjects, or it's assumed that they're not interested in technical subjects, mathematics, sciences, engineering, these kinds of things. Robotics is a classic one. You know, I think nowadays they've got little robotics kits for kids, and very often those are not going to girl children. People are buying them and giving them to boys, nephews, sons, etc. So it starts very early. Of course, we can also talk about the stereotypes that exist in the media since about the 80s that were really starting to push computing and programming for boys as a boys thing. Even Lego kind of bought into that for a while and kind of started segregating their Lego sets. It's changing a little bit, but still there. And then through the teen years, I can talk about my own experience. I was really into computing and computers as a kid. I started programming when I was 8 years old. But what I found was that as I got further into high school, doing more computer science subjects, there were fewer girls around me, and I was good at many different subjects. So I chose the other subjects where I felt more included. And it wasn't that the boys were actively excluding me. It's just that at that age, you do tend to gravitate more to your own gender, and therefore they just weren't including me, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I ended up studying other subjects and going into communications before coming back to programming in my 30s. And so what we're seeing is that there are fewer women in computer science degrees, for example, and that is the main source of where companies are pulling their technical talent. So there therefore becomes this gap. Okay, if in the teen years there aren't girls transitioning into these computer science degrees, and if the women in the computer science degrees are also feeling excluded and dropping out, then you get to a point where there are just fewer people to pull from to get those early career starts.
Yeah, and maybe to kind of lead on from that, Kerry, in terms of your perspective, what are your thoughts on that pipeline issue?
I think it's a huge problem. If we look at the global women in tech share, it's at 24%. So it's not just in Germany. We also see that in Europe, it's at around 21%. So it creates a huge, lack of talent. So if companies have ambitious goals, they want to get more gender parity in terms of their workforce. It's a huge competition for a very finite pool of talent. So I think it goes, to your point, way back, we have to get more women and girls excited and feel included in STEM because there is a huge pipeline issue.
Yeah. And maybe just, Rosamond, in terms of upskilling and from your perspective with Start Steps and what you do, talk to us about that, I guess, the upskilling piece then.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's an important part as we talk about pipeline issues, and if 24% is the number, how can we increase that? And I think then rapid upskilling programs come really into play. And for that, what we do is we partner with companies like Zalando and Axel Springer in that regard, how we can develop custom pipelines so that we prepare people for those early careers and provide that. I think that's very, very important to do from an investment perspective, because I think there is a lot of aptitude for it. We see it's so many people that are motivated. When we did this partnership with Zalando early on, for people who were from non-tech background to go through an orientation of sort to see if they have what it takes. But they always do, but I think it's just
exactly.
the question there is like to boost that confidence, to get that validation of sorts. Most often people know. So I think it's a very important issue to start giving opportunities and believing in people, and they figure it out for themselves.
Alina, what are your thoughts being a woman in the tech ecosystem and the work that you do in both spaces? Yeah.
I think getting into tech for me was really out of chance. So as you were talking about representation mattering, I didn't have any role models within my circle or my ecosystem. And even though the school I went to was specialized for maths and science, I didn't know anyone who ended up in tech. And that for me, I think, was a failure on the school education system part, because if they had brought in more role models from these industries, I think it would have opened my mind as to what was possible. So it was only, even though I studied a technical career and I went straight into engineering, it was only sort of after a couple of years that I realized this world of tech is even available to me. And then I had to figure out how to break into it. But I think I would have started much earlier if I'd had that circle around me. And I see that for so many of the women that I know. And that's what one of the things we try to break at Founderland is we have this community of 600 women of color entrepreneurs across Europe in 26 different countries. And we do our best to get them on as many stages as possible, as much PR as we can, because if the younger women can see those women and imagine them as an entrepreneur, they will start to believe that they can do it too. But unfortunately, even when, you know, like we had a Founderland demo day last week, and we asked everyone to close their eyes and imagine the most successful entrepreneur they know, and everyone said Elon Musk. Even at a women of color tech event, which is sad, because it just shows you how much representation matters, and that's the story we need to change.
So we've kind of looked at, okay, role modeling, upskilling. Are there any sort of other initiatives that, you know, have been successful apart from mentoring and upskilling, or are those the kind of two main programs and activities that you feel needs to be driven, scaled or escalated in the German ecosystem to kind of advance women in tech? What can we think about in terms of solutions?
I think a huge piece that I would think about is education. So I work in-house in a company, so I think that's super important to have that mindset in senior leadership. Why is diversity important? That we're really trying to broaden our pool of talent and have the best possible talent available, and kind of changing our perspective of what does that look like, because we maybe have a very narrow vision of what a strong software engineer could look like, or data scientist, what's their background, what's the pedigree we're looking for. So I think changing that narrative is super important and valuable. And also, I think in terms of the recruitment process and assessing talent, making sure that we have inclusive policies really end to end. So we have diverse people interviewing our applicants and our candidates, that we don't just look for super senior principal level talent, but we think about people who are coming into the field at an earlier stage and creating opportunity for them. So I think that education piece is something I would really underline. How do we think about talent, and what does it look like?
Yeah, and I love that point around being able to tell and sell the story and the narrative of why it's important to everyone in the organization. So like at senior level, board level, holistically throughout the company, so that everyone's bought in. I think that's really an important point. So thanks for sharing
and I can say one thing to that as well. Something that I've found kind of helps communicate that to higher level people is focusing on the idea of people doing their best work. In what scenario do people do their best work? Is it when they're worried about what someone's thinking about them, what someone's saying about them, how they're being treated, whether they'll get promoted, or is it where they feel safe and included? Because it turns out you don't have to be part of a historically excluded group to feel excluded at work. You know, so if you can create an inclusive environment generally, you will find that everyone is doing better work in that environment.
So I think from the perspective of an early stage investor, so we go in really early into organizations, and one of the parts of that role is also supporting them with hiring and making sure that they have inclusive practices when it comes to hiring.
And I guess just making a segue to Germany as a whole. So, I mean, for me, I absolutely love Germany. I'm always back and forth between London and Berlin. And I've been always asked, when are you going to make the move? And I'm still almost there. But it's just fantastic. And it's no surprise. Euronews said that Germany is Europe's leading tech hub. So why do you think that is? What is so exciting about Germany as a whole? What is Germany doing that other maybe countries can learn from in terms of providing opportunities and innovation in tech?
I mean, just one part, there's a joke that Berlin is not equal to Germany, right? So you said we have two very different sets there. So
that's true.
I think Berlin and Munich are the two biggest tech hubs when it comes to the traditional tech that we talk about, startups, and that have now become scale-ups. We're sitting here at Zalando. It's a good example of that. I guess for Berlin, one of the most important part is also the people with a migration background. I think about 40% of the entrepreneurs that have started companies there, they come up with that, and that actually makes Berlin so unique, is because it's such a diverse city, and it has this rich history, and it actually allows you to be innovative, to reinvent yourself, to find those things, and that plays the role into to becoming that hub that it is.
I would say, to build on that, I think there's also great universities in Germany. So there's like an immediate pipeline of talent available to move into the workforce. I think that's a huge one. Coming from the US, I think what's also really appealing about working in Germany is the work-life balance and how much, I think, rights you have as an employee in Germany. I think that's huge and highly attractive. And I think the government's been quite smart and strategic, giving tax breaks and benefits to people who want to invest and do business in Germany. And I think they have to, because there's a huge labor shortage in Germany. So I think the latest numbers are like 700,000 vacant jobs where we need people, and that number is just going to go up because of the low birth rates in Germany and the aging population. So I think there's a real need to get more professionals into the country.
Yeah.
I think also the cost of living is helpful, particularly if you compare all the big major tech cities. Berlin being one of the lower ones helps the city immensely, because especially if you're a tech entrepreneur, if you're living somewhere like London, it's probably much harder to make ends meet when you don't have any money at the beginning of your journey and you're completely bootstrapped and you're looking for funding. So I think it just fuels that talent, because you have the room to be able to start a business a bit more easily and the barrier is lowered.
Thinking about now skills and the future of the tech ecosystem, and what skills we need. If we think about now, we're in 2024, in 10 years time it'll be 2034, which is crazy to even imagine. What do you think is going to matter in terms of skills when we look at what we need in the workplace, especially in the tech ecosystem? I know you talked about, Kerry, the job shortages. It's going to get even more. But what about those skills to fill those roles?
Well, I wish I could tell you. I think it's it's just a funny reference. As somebody asked Jeff Bezos that, what do you think in 10 years will happen? How do you strategize around that to make a strategy? And he said, well, I don't know what will, but there are certain things that I know that would never change. And in his case, he was saying that, for example, customer will always want their delivery on time, and they would want cheaper prices. So I think the same would go in this analogy to, maybe we know what are the things that will still be relevant. And I think that's creative thinking, that's empathy, that's social skills, soft skills, resilience. No matter how the workforce changes or the hard skill part changes, those soft skill elements actually would not change. And if we strategize around that and we invest in that, and we think that that stays relevant no matter what, then we can go. Just to answer the question more from what potentially might be the relevant skills, we see so much buzz around AI, and from that perspective, you see the traditional roles that we have. We don't know how much of disruption happens, how many jobs would actually just be wiped out. A good example of that is, for example, in customer care, you see there was an experiment done by Klarna that actually they replaced their customer care agents, and it was scarily accurate in a way. So there are a lot of jobs that are going, but there are a lot of jobs that are being created. An example of that, as Carrie mentioned, in Germany, we have the skill gap, 700,000, and we have 400,000 on top of that for this year. So it will go to 1 million. Then you still need people, and there will be skills that you would need. For example, right now, tech in general, still software engineering, data scientists, these are the most in-demand jobs. Cybersecurity is one of the fields that will actually grow a lot. And then in green tech is one of the fields where the robots are not up to speed to take those jobs. You still need someone to install that solar panel for you or that heat pump for you. So I think the human skills, so to say, are going to stay relevant as much as we grow and the world changes, and the hard skills would develop as we go.
I can add some hard skills maybe that I can kind of see happening. As you said, I'm not sure exactly how AI is going to impact traditional software engineering. I will say it's not looking great. So I would say one thing is, when back in the day, people had to learn these low-level programming languages, and then they got abstractions on top. Went from Java ecosystem into like Kotlin, for example. You don't need to know exactly what this means, by the way, but it's just important to understand like that when you start learning Kotlin, you're no longer programming in the original base level language, right? You're programming kind of one level above it. And that's kind of how I think of AI, right? I do think AI is going to take over a huge majority of the coding tasks, the day-to-day coding tasks, but it will still need people behind it, not only driving it, but also checking it. So I think that skills to do with software architecture, so the flow of information in a technical sense will be more important. Cybersecurity, I was absolutely going to say it's going to become crucial, because you'll have AI hackers versus AI cybersecurity versus, there's going to be like, I don't know how that ends, but it's going to be rough for a while, I think. So those skills will be useful. Of course, also things like immersive media, so being able to drive that. I mean, we're seeing a lot of advancement in AI in terms of video creation, audio creation, and of course stories. And then we're seeing things like the Apple Vision Pro coming out and kind of popularizing AR a little bit more. So I can see a sense in which immersive media skills for developers will also become more important. And things like DevOps, FinOps. So for example, how you track the monetization or the spend that you have via your software is also something that I think will still be there.
Okay, how do we upskill women then? How do we make sure that the women in the tech ecosystem in Germany are able to now leverage those skills? Any thoughts around that?
I think there has to be upskilling inside companies. I think companies need to take responsibility for seeing, perhaps like being really strategic, really maybe even harsh about, okay, what areas of our business can we foresee being reduced in future? And what, if we have staff in those areas, for example, let's say hypothetically marketing, okay, and we say, okay, I can see that a lot of the marketing tasks we can actually outsource to an AI marketing agent, but we have like 20 marketing people, and 5 of them in particular are such high performers, we don't want to lose them no matter what. Okay, well then it's your responsibility as a company to say, how can we retrain those people into an area that they're interested in? What are some areas where we do foresee a need in the future, and can we retrain them? So that's a more practical approach.
If we look at startups, so recent research has shown that 1.8% of VC or European VC funding goes to women. And in this report, some of the women who were surveyed said that they feel that to increase this number, and this is talked about a lot, especially in Europe as a whole. In the UK, we always have these conversations. In Germany, they were saying, okay, the women said that they feel that if there were more female VCs, this number would increase. What are your thoughts on this?
agree.
Yeah.
To put it simply.
Yeah.
But this, you're right, and this report also came out recently on the other side that I think 30% or 38% of VC funds are all male. Which is shocking.
Yeah.
38, and
38%,
then 60% are male majority. Having been an entrepreneur before, I think if you don't see someone who looks like you necessarily on the other side of the table, I think it's harder to pitch to that person. You're already feeling uncomfortable. You know, it is a vulnerable space to be an entrepreneur, and you're kind of putting all your dreams into this thing that you're hoping will exist, and you're hoping that the person on the other side of the table will listen, will treat you with respect, and will then at least give you some support, even if they're not going to invest into you. And so we need diversity on both sides of the table in order to really change the game. The way I've tended to see the VC scene work in the past is that it relied on connections. So the way people would invest is, I got this pitch deck from a friend of mine, so I'm going to look at it, or I take it more seriously. And what that meant is you're just looking at your existing network and looking at those entrepreneurs. But it goes against exactly what VC is, because the whole point of venture capital is to invest in outliers. And how do you find outliers if you only look at your, first or secondary degree connections? You need to look for people who are completely far away from you, who are seeing different problems, who are tackling it in completely different ways. So we're trying to break that, and I definitely am with the work I'm doing, but there's a long way to go.
Sorry, I just want to build on this. Like, it's so true. I mean, of course, particularly more true for women, but as we see, their whole calculation is based on, I think the model is like this: okay, we know 90% of our startups won't work, so they just put that, and then let's just go through that's one particular lens. I mean, like, if you look at the startups getting funded in Germany, in Berlin, have to be a WHU, ex-McKinsey, something. These are just basically the type of people that they invest in. And as Alina was saying, that they just basically who knows who, and it's the usual suspects. One startup doesn't work, they invest in the same people. I actually don't know the exact numbers, but I've seen that particularly women entrepreneurs have always outperformed men when they invest in VC. So if the VC game was really data-driven and success-based, they would actually take the statistics and do.
I think it is changing, though. So a lot of funds are actually looking at research-based theses, where they're saying, okay, here's my thesis on what the world will look like in 10 years. So I'm actually not going to look at my network, but I'm going to become an expert in certain spaces, and then I'm going to look for the best company in that space. So it is changing, but the ecosystem shift will take a long time.
So across Germany, 34% of STEM students are female. What are your thoughts on this? And, what more can we do? Maybe aside from, we know that we need more role models, right? We know that we need to encourage more female students, as you mentioned, to think about careers in tech. But is there anything else that we can do?
So I know of one organization in Berlin, unfortunately I can't remember the name of it, but there is an organization in Berlin, or based out of Berlin, that is going around to schools doing coding programs, after school coding programs only for girls. They also do like mixed camps in the summer and stuff like that, so it's not exclusively, but during the year it's focused on girls specifically. I think that's one way to do it, to actually have a proper way in which girls specifically are given that opportunity with other girls to advance in that way.
Any last thoughts about anything that we've discussed that you wanted to kind of get across, share?
I would say something. So I moved to Germany in 2016, coming from Silicon Valley, and diversity was really not a topic back then. Like, I was like talking to an empty wall, it seemed like sometimes when it came to the topic, but I've seen this really change for the better in the last couple of years. So rather than having conversations about why diversity is important, it's like, how are we going to do it? What are we going to do next? So I've seen a really positive shift in the right direction. So I know it's early days, but I do see a lot of potential and reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a good way that we can move forward, if sort of taking on to what we've discussed and shared, is now around the implementation. Like we're talking about investing and thinking about how we can work together. So hopefully, we've got some. I know we've got a lot of takeaways from this discussion. So thank you all for joining me for this chat. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.